Millionaire bets 1 million that no one can open his safe, but a homeless man succeeds. Michael Thompson was about to lose $1 million to the last person he expected. The 42-year-old New Yorker businessman watched in disbelief as the man in worn clothes and a black cap delicately fiddled with the panel of his most secure safe. "Impossible," murmured Michael, nervously adjusting his navy blue tie. The sound of numbers being entered echoed through the tense silence of his office on the 23rd floor of the commercial building on Fifth Avenue. It all began 3 weeks earlier, when Michael Thompson, owner of Thompson & Associates Construction, made a statement that would change his life forever. During an interview for the local television program Business Spotlight, he arrogantly claimed that his German-made secure vault safe was impenetrable. "I bet $1 million no one can open this safe without the code," he declared to the cameras, thumping his chest proudly. "It's the most secure in the United States. Not even the best experts could crack it." The statement went viral on social media and soon reached the ears of many in New York City. Among them was Robert Wilson, a 57-year-old man who had lived on the streets for 15 years but carried a secret few knew. Robert had watched the interview on a bakery's TV, where he often asked for water. His calloused hands trembled slightly when he heard the bet. He knew that safe model better than anyone. In the following days, dozens of people showed up at Michael's office. Security experts, hackers, even former bank employees tried their luck. All failed miserably. The safe remained locked, guarding the company's most important documents and a considerable sum of cash. Michael began to feel invincible. Each contestant's failure fed his ego even more. He even raised the bet to 2 million, then 3. The press covered every attempt, turning the case into a media spectacle. "See, Daniel," Michael said to his partner Daniel Roberts, "I knew it was impossible. That safe is a fortress." Daniel, a bald 50-year-old man, shook his head worriedly. "Michael, don't you think you're going too far? 3 million is a lot of money." "Money I'll never have to pay," Michael replied with an arrogant smile. That safe is impenetrable. But Michael's confidence began to waver when his own 18-year-old son, Ryan, questioned his father's behavior. "Dad, you're turning into someone I don't recognize," Ryan said during a family dinner. "This obsession with the safe is consuming you." Michael abruptly stood up, knocking over his wine glass. "You don't understand anything, Ryan. This is about honor, about keeping my word." His wife, Jennifer Thompson, an elegant 38-year-old woman, gently touched her husband's arm. "Michael, Ryan is right. You've been different lately, more aggressive, more insensitive." "Insensitive?" Michael laughed bitterly. "I built an empire, Jennifer. Everything we have came from my determination. And you question that?" The argument quickly escalated. Ryan stood up from the table, his eyes filled with tears. "You want to know what I think, Dad? I hope someone opens that damn safe just so you can learn something about humility." His son's words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. He watched Ryan storm upstairs and slam his bedroom door. Jennifer followed their son, leaving Michael alone in the dining room. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He paced around the house, thinking about his son's words. Had he really become insensitive? Was his obsession with the safe hurting his family? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The next day, Michael arrived at the office earlier than usual. His secretary, Patricia, a capable 45-year-old woman, greeted him with a worried expression. "Mr. Thompson, there's a man waiting to speak with you. He said it's about the vault bet." "Another one?" Michael sighed. "Send him in." When the door opened, Michael couldn't hide his surprise. The man who entered was completely different from all the other candidates. Robert Wilson wore old, worn-out clothes, a black cap partially covering his graying hair, and his bearded face showed the marks of a hard life. "Excuse me, sir," Robert said in a calm, respectful voice. "My name is Robert Wilson. I've come about your vault." Michael looked the man up and down, clearly uncomfortable with his appearance. "Look, Mr. Robert, is it? I admire your courage, but this vault has already been tested by experts. People with years of experience have failed." "I understand, Mr. Thompson," Robert replied patiently. But I'd like to try. Do you have experience with vaults? Michael asked, trying not to sound condescending. Robert hesitated for a moment, his nervous hands fidgeting with the edge of his cap. Let's just say I've worked with them before. Michael laughed, but it wasn't a joyful laugh. It was the laugh of someone whose patience was being tested. Look, I don't mean to be rude, but you understand we're talking about a $3 million vault, right? This isn't a joke. I understand perfectly, Mr. Thompson. Robert remained calm. And if I succeed, if you succeed, Michael emphasized the word if, you'll take the $3 million. But I have to warn you, many have tried, and all have failed. Robert nodded and walked over to the vault. It was an imposing piece of black steel with a sophisticated digital panel. Michael watched as Robert carefully examined every detail of the equipment. Secure Vault Model BX2000, Robert murmured to himself. Triple encryption system, backup fingerprint sensor, and... He paused, lightly touching a small side panel. Emergency master code system. A chill ran down Michael's spine. How did this man know so many technical details? How do you know that? He asked, stepping closer. Robert didn't answer right away. His hands moved over the vault with a familiarity that made Michael increasingly uneasy. I worked many years in security, Robert finally said, before everything changed in my life. What kind of work? Michael pressed. I was a security systems engineer, Robert revealed, not taking his eyes off the vault. Specialized in vaults and banking systems. The revelation hit Michael like a bolt of lightning. An engineer? This shabby man was an engineer? How did you... what happened? Michael asked, genuinely curious now. Robert stopped what he was doing and turned to Michael. His brown eyes held a depth of sadness that made the businessman uncomfortable. Life sometimes plays tricks on us, Mr. Thompson. One day you have everything, the next. He gestured to his worn clothes. You have nothing left. But how? Michael insisted. Robert turned his attention back to the vault, clearly unwilling to elaborate. May I try to open it now? He asked, changing the subject. Michael nodded, but his mind was racing. Who was this man, really? How had a specialist engineer ended up on the streets? Robert began working on the vault's panel. His fingers danced over the buttons with a precision that impressed Michael. It wasn't random like the other candidates. There was method, technical knowledge in every movement. What exactly are you doing? Michael asked. Accessing the diagnostic system, Robert explained without stopping his work. Every vault has an emergency mode in case the main system fails. But wouldn't that compromise security? Only if you knew it existed and how to access it, Robert replied. It's a well-kept secret by the manufacturers. Michael felt his confidence wavering. For the first time since he'd made the bet, there was a real possibility someone could open his vault. How long will this take? He asked, nervously adjusting his tie. A few minutes, Robert answered, focused. Maybe less. The minutes dragged like hours. Michael paced back and forth in the office, his hands cold and sweaty. $3 million. It was a lot of money, even for him. But worse than the money would be the humiliation. How would he explain it to his family, his partners, the press? Done, Robert announced softly. The sound of the vault opening echoed through the office like thunder. Michael stood frozen, staring at the steel door now slightly ajar. Impossible, he murmured, slowly stepping closer. Robert moved away from the vault and turned to Michael. There was no triumph in his eyes, only deep sadness. How did you do this? Michael asked, his voice barely a whisper. Like I said, I worked with these systems for 20 years, Robert replied calmly. I knew this specific model because I helped develop it. The revelation hit like a bucket of cold water. Michael looked at Robert with a mix of admiration and horror. You helped develop it? I worked for Secure Vault America for 2 decades, Robert explained. I was responsible for the most advanced security systems in the country. Michael sank into the chair behind his desk. His mind was in chaos. How had he not researched the Vault's developers? How had he been so arrogant as to assume no one could know it better than him? Why didn't you tell me this before, he asked. Would you have believed me, Robert countered. A man like me, looking like this. Would you have taken me seriously? Michael realized Robert was right. He judged the man by his appearance, assuming someone in his situation couldn't have technical knowledge. What happened to you? Michael asked, genuinely interested now. How did you end up on the streets? Robert sat in the chair across from Michael's desk. For the first time, he seemed to relax a little. It's a long story, Mr. Thompson. I have time, Michael said, surprised to find he truly wanted to listen. Robert took a deep breath before beginning. 15 years ago, I was Robert Wilson, chief engineer at Secure Vault America. I had a beautiful home in Westchester, an imported car, premium health insurance. I was married to Catherine, a wonderful woman, and we had a daughter, little Lily Grace. Robert's eyes filled with tears as he mentioned his family. What happened? Michael asked gently. Lily Grace was born with a rare heart condition. She needed an experimental surgery that cost a fortune. Even with insurance, there were costs I couldn't cover. Robert paused, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. I started working double, triple shifts, took on extra projects, consulting gigs, did anything to get the money for my daughter's surgery. And did you? Michael asked, though he already suspected the answer from Robert's tone. No, Robert shook his head. Lily Grace, she didn't make it. We lost our little girl when she was 5. The silence that followed was heavy. Michael felt a lump in his throat. He thought of Ryan, how it would feel to lose a child. Catherine never forgave me, Robert continued. She said, if I had spent less time working and more time taking care of Lily Grace, maybe we would have noticed the symptoms earlier. But you were working to save her, Michael protested. That was the paradox that destroyed me, Robert said bitterly. The more I worked to save my daughter, the less time I spent with her. Catherine was partly right. I became obsessive, focused only on the money, the technical solution. I forgot to be a father, to be a husband. Robert paused, clearly struggling with his emotions. After we lost Lily Grace, my marriage fell apart. Catherine moved to another state, said she couldn't even look at me without remembering what we'd lost. I started drinking to forget the pain. First, just on weekends, then every day. And your job? I lost everything, Robert said, simply. I showed up drunk at the office, couldn't concentrate anymore, made technical mistakes, missed important deadlines. Secure Vault fired me after 20 years of service. Michael listened in silence, beginning to understand the path that had led this brilliant man to the streets. Without a job, without family, I started drinking even more, Robert continued. Sold the house to pay debts, then the car. In 2 years, I'd lost everything, ended up on the streets. And you never tried to get back on your feet, Michael asked. I tried many times, Robert replied. But who hires a 55-year-old engineer who's lived on the streets for over a decade? Even if I tried to stop drinking, even if I still knew all the technical knowledge, people look at me and do exactly what you did today. Michael lowered his head, ashamed. Robert was right. He'd judged the man by his appearance. Why did you try to open the vault? Michael asked. Because $3 million could change my life, Robert said honestly. It could give me a second chance, an opportunity to get off the streets, clean myself up, maybe even try to find Catherine and apologize for my mistakes. Michael was silent for several minutes, processing everything he'd heard. Finally, he stood and walked to the still open vault. Well, he said, his voice strangely calm, a bet's a bet. Robert looked at him in surprise. Mr. Thompson. You opened the vault, Mr. Wilson. The $3 million are yours. Robert shook his head vigorously. No, Mr. Thompson, I can't accept. What do you mean you can't accept? Michael asked, confused. You won the bet. It wouldn't be honest of me, Robert explained. I had an unfair advantage. I knew the vault because I helped design it. It wasn't a fair win. Michael was stunned. Here was a man who'd lived on the streets for 15 years, who desperately needed the money, refusing $3 million on principle. But you met the terms of the bet, Michael insisted. The technical terms, yes, Robert agreed, but not the spirit of the bet. You were challenging someone to crack an unknown code. I had inside information. Michael sank heavily into his chair. In just minutes, this man had turned his worldview upside down. First, he'd shattered his arrogance by opening the unbreakable vault. Now he was teaching him a lesson in honesty by refusing the prize. "What do you want then?" Michael asked. "An opportunity," Robert said simply. "A chance to prove I can still be useful. It doesn't have to be here, at your firm. But maybe you know someone who needs someone with my experience." Michael studied Robert for a long moment. Suddenly he thought of Ryan, of how he'd become arrogant and insensitive. He thought of how he'd judged Robert by his appearance. He thought of all the lessons this man was teaching him without even realizing it. "Mr. Wilson," Michael finally said, "I'd like to make you a different proposal." Robert looked at him expectantly. "How about working here with me? At Thompson & Associates, we always need security consultants, especially someone with your experience." Robert fell silent for several seconds, clearly shocked. "Mr. Thompson, I can't. Look at me. I don't even have proper clothes to work in a place like this." "That's just details," Michael said, standing up. "If you accept, I'll cover everything you need. Clothes, an apartment to settle in, treatment if you need to stop drinking for good. Whatever it takes for you to get back on your feet." "Why would you do that?" Robert asked, suspicious. "You don't even know me." "Because you taught me something important today," Michael replied. "You taught me about humility, about not judging people by appearances, about honesty. And because I have a son the age your Lily Grace would be today. And I'd like to be the kind of man he can be proud of." Robert stayed silent, clearly moved. "Besides," Michael continued, "you might be exactly what my company needs. Someone with real experience, who understands both the technical side and life's challenges." I don't know what to say," Robert murmured. "Say yes," Michael smiled, "and give me a chance to prove I can be better than I was today." Robert looked at his calloused hands, then at Michael, then at the open vault. "There's one condition," he finally said. "What?" "I want to earn this by working. I don't want charity. If I'm going to work here, I want it to be because I'm competent, not because you feel sorry for me." Michael extended his hand. "Deal, Mr. Wilson, but be ready. I'll expect nothing but your best." Robert shook Michael's hand, and for the first time in 15 years, he felt something he'd forgotten: hope. But the story was far from over. In the days that followed, Michael would discover that reintegrating Robert into society would be much harder than he'd imagined, and Robert would learn that leaving the streets was just the first of many challenges he'd face. Daniel Roberts, Michael's partner, did not take the news of Robert's hiring well. "Have you lost your mind, Michael?" Daniel shouted the next day when he heard the decision. "Hiring a homeless man to work in security consulting? What will clients think?" "He's not a homeless man, Daniel," Michael replied calmly. "He's a security systems engineer." "Was," Daniel corrected. 15 years ago. Do you have any idea how much technology has changed since then? He's completely outdated." "Then he'll catch up," Michael said firmly. "What if he drinks on the job? What if he scares off clients? What if this is all some elaborate scam?" Daniel pressed. Michael stopped and stared at his partner. "You know what I think, Daniel. I think you're afraid he'll be better than our current consultants." "That's ridiculous," Daniel protested. "Is it? Then why are you so worked up?" The argument between the partners dragged on for hours. Daniel even threatened to leave the firm if Michael insisted on hiring Robert. The tension in the office was palpable. Meanwhile, Robert faced his own struggles. Michael had rented him a small apartment and bought him proper clothes, but the transition wasn't easy. On his first night in the apartment, Robert sat on the empty bedroom floor and cried, not from sadness but from a mix of gratitude and fear. He'd grown so used to life on the streets that the idea of a normal life terrified him. He opened the closet and looked at the suits Michael had bought. He touched the fabric with trembling hands. Could he really become the man he once was, or was this just a temporary illusion? The next day, Robert was supposed to report for work, but he woke up with an anxiety attack. His hands were shaking, not from alcohol withdrawal, but from pure nervousness. It had been 15 years since he'd stepped into a corporate environment as an employee. Michael arrived early at the office, eager to introduce Robert to the other staff. but when Robert showed up at reception, Michael barely recognized him. The man was impeccably dressed in a dark grey suit, with freshly cut hair and a trimmed beard. He looked 10 years younger. "Mr. Wilson," Michael greeted him, "you look great." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," Robert replied, clearly nervous. "I hope I don't disappoint you." "Call me Michael," he said, guiding Robert through the office. "Let's meet the team." Robert's introduction to the employees was tense. Some looked at him with curiosity, others with suspicion. Patricia, the secretary, was the only one who greeted him with a genuine smile. "It's a pleasure to have you with us, Mr. Wilson," she said. "Thank you, Patricia," Robert replied politely. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, Robert's first project would be reviewing the security system of a small community bank. It was a test Michael had designed to see how Robert would perform. "It's a simple project," Michael explained. "Hope Community Bank wants to update its security system. Nothing too complex." Robert nodded, but inside he was terrified. What if he failed? What if he'd forgotten everything he knew? What if Daniel had been right about him being outdated? At Hope Community Bank, Robert was greeted by the manager, Sarah Johnson, a woman in her 40s who ran the institution with a firm hand. "So you're the expert Thompson and Associates sent?" Sarah asked, looking Robert up and down. "Yes, ma'am," Robert replied, trying to hide his nervousness. "I'll be direct, Mr. Wilson," Sarah said. "Our bank serves an underprivileged community. We don't have money to waste on expensive consultations that don't work." "I completely understand," Robert answered. "May I take a look at the current system?" Sarah led him to the room where the security system was housed. Robert felt a chill in his stomach when he saw the equipment. It was all much more modern than what he was used to. Technology had truly advanced a lot in 15 years. "This system was installed 2 years ago," Sarah explained, "but we've been having some issues, false alarms, camera system failures." Robert approached the equipment. His hands trembled slightly as he touched the control panel. Would he be able to fix the problems? "May I have a few minutes to examine everything?" he asked. "Of course," Sarah replied. "I'll be in my office if you need anything." Alone with the equipment, Robert took a deep breath. He closed his eyes and tried to remember everything he knew about security systems. Slowly, he began inspecting each component. To his surprise, he found that the basic principles hadn't changed all that much. The technology was more advanced, but the underlying logic was the same. Gradually, his confidence began to return. After 2 hours of analysis, Robert identified the issues. They were configuration problems, things an experienced technician should have noticed during installation. "Done," he announced when Sarah returned. "Already?" she asked, surprised. "The problem was with the sensor calibration," Robert explained. "They were set for a much drier environment than ours. With New York City's humidity, they were triggering false alarms." He showed her how to adjust the settings and explained other improvements that could be made at no extra cost. "This is impressive," Sarah said, clearly pleased. "In 2 years, no technician had identified this issue." Robert smiled timidly. "Sometimes it's just a matter of experience." When Robert returned to the office of Thompson and Associates, Michael was eager to hear about his first day. "How did it go?" he asked as soon as Robert walked in. "Pretty well. I think," Robert replied, "I managed to fix the bank's problems." 15 minutes later, Michael's phone rang. It was Sarah Johnson. "Mr. Thompson, I must congratulate you. Mr. Wilson is exceptional. He solved in 2 hours a problem no one had been able to fix in 2 years. When Michael hung up, he couldn't hide his smile. "I think you passed the test," he told Robert. But Daniel, who had overheard the conversation, wasn't satisfied. "A stroke of luck," he muttered. "Let's see how he handles bigger clients." Daniel's jab bothered Robert more than he wanted to admit. That night, in his apartment, he stared at the bottle of whiskey Michael had bought as part of the welcome kit. The temptation was strong, one drink to calm his nerves. Robert picked up the bottle, opened it, and inhaled the scent. For a moment, he almost gave in, but then he thought of Lily Grace, of Catherine, of all the opportunities he'd wasted because of alcohol. He poured the entire bottle down the sink. "Not this time," he murmured to himself. In the following days, Robert worked tirelessly to catch up. He spent nights studying new technologies, reading technical manuals, watching online videos. Michael even found him in the office at 2 in the morning, hunched over books and his computer. "Robert, you need to rest," Michael said. "I can't." "Michael," Robert replied without looking up, "I have 15 years to make up for, but you don't have to do it all at once." Robert finally looked at Michael. "Yes, I do. Because the moment I fail, the moment I disappoint a client, Daniel will use it as proof I shouldn't be here." Michael realized Robert was right. Daniel was constantly looking for signs that hiring him had been a mistake. "You know what?" Michael said. "How about I help? I can put you in touch with some vendors, maybe arrange more formal training." "That would be amazing," Robert said, gratitude shining in his eyes. But when Michael proposed sending Robert to a security systems refresher, "Of course," Daniel exploded. "Now you want to spend even more money on him?" Daniel shouted. "Michael, this has gone too far." "It's an investment," Michael argued. "It's throwing money away," Daniel shot back. "And you know what bothers me most? You're paying more attention to this pet project of yours than to the company." "Pet project?" "That's what it is," Daniel said coldly. "Your attempt to feel good about yourself, but while you play savior, the company is losing money." Daniel's accusation hit Michael hard. Was it true? Was he neglecting the company because of Robert? That same week, tensions rose when an important client, Watson & Sons Construction, cancelled a contract after a meeting where Robert had been present. "They said they weren't comfortable with our new consultant," Daniel reported, with obvious satisfaction. "Seems someone mentioned his past." Michael was furious. Who told them about Robert's past? "Does it matter?" Daniel asked. "What matters is we're losing clients because of him." Robert, who had overheard the conversation, from the next room entered Michael's office. "Mr. Thompson, maybe it's best if I leave," he said, clearly shaken. "No," Michael said firmly, "you're not going anywhere." "But if I'm hurting the company—" "You're not harming anything," Michael interrupted. "Some people are prejudiced." "That's not your problem." But inside, Michael was starting to doubt. What if Daniel was right? What if his decision to help Robert was really hurting the company? The crisis reached its peak the following week, when Michael's 16-year-old daughter, Emma, asked him a question he couldn't answer. "Dad, why are you trying so hard to help this man?" They were having a family dinner, a rare occasion when Michael had made it home in time for the meal. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Everyone at school is talking about it," Emma continued. "They say you hired a homeless man and that the company is having problems because of it." Jennifer, Michael's wife, gently touched his hand. "Michael, maybe it's time to rethink this situation." "You too?" Michael asked, incredulous. "It's not that, honey," Jennifer said softly. "It's just, well, you have a responsibility to the family, to the employees. You can't risk everything for one person." "Why not?" Ryan, the eldest son, interrupted. "Remember when you told me a man is measured by how he treats those who can give him nothing in return?" Michael looked at his son, surprised. "This, Robert, Wilson can't give you anything, Dad," Ryan continued. "But you're helping him anyway. I think that's admirable." "Ryan's right," Emma said, changing her mind. "Maybe the problem isn't what you're doing, but how other people are reacting." The family conversation left Michael even more confused. Part of his family supported his decision, part questioned it. His partners were divided. Clients were pulling away. What should he do? The following Monday, the answer came unexpectedly. Robert didn't show up for work. Michael called the apartment he had rented for him, but no one answered. Worried, he decided to go there in person. When he arrived at the building, the doorman told him Robert had left Friday night and hadn't returned. "He seemed really down," the doorman commented. "He was carrying a small suitcase." Michael's heart raced. Where could Robert have gone? Had he given up and returned to the streets? He spent the whole day searching for Robert. He visited shelters, spoke with social workers, checked the places where homeless people usually gathered. Nothing. "Why are you doing this?" Daniel asked when Michael returned to the office late that afternoon. "If he left, it's a sign he knew it wouldn't work out. Or it's a sign we pressured him so much he thought it was better to give up." Michael shot back. "Michael, be realistic," Daniel said, sitting across from his boss. Maybe this is for the best. The company will go back to normal, clients will return, and a good man will go back to the streets because we didn't know how to support him, Michael finished bitterly. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He paced the house thinking about Robert, wondering where he could be. Around 3 in the morning, he decided to go out and search again. He drove through the empty streets of New York City, stopping at every underpass, every square where people slept outdoors. With each face, he hoped to see Robert, but was always disappointed. It was on his way home, just as the sun was rising, that he finally saw him. Robert was sitting on a bench in Union Square, watching the city's morning bustle. Michael quickly parked and ran to him. "Robert, thank God I found you." Robert looked up, clearly surprised. "Michael, what are you doing here?" "Looking for you," Michael said, sitting beside him on the bench. "You disappeared, didn't come to work." I thought it would be better," Robert said, lowering his head. "I'm causing trouble for you, for the company." "What trouble?" "Michael, I hear the conversations. I know Daniel wants to fire me. I know you've lost clients because of me," Robert explained. "I can't let my presence harm everything." "Oh, you've built." Michael Thompson stayed silent for a moment, watching the movement in Union Square. People heading to work, vendors setting up their stalls, the city waking up to another day. "You know what I realized yesterday when I was looking for you?" Michael finally said. Robert looked at him expectantly. "I realized that in the last few months since you showed up, I've become a better person. More human, less arrogant. My son Ryan is proud of me again. My wife says she's rediscovered the man she married." "But the company will survive," Michael interrupted. "Prejudiced clients aren't clients I want anyway. And as for Daniel, well, maybe it's time we reevaluated our partnership." Robert was surprised by the statement. "You'd do that? Risk your partnership for me?" "Not for you," Michael corrected. "For the right cause. Because I've learned that success isn't just about money. It's about being able to look in the mirror and be proud of who you are." Robert remained silent for several minutes. "Where did you spend the night?" Michael asked. "At a shelter," Robert replied. I couldn't go back to the streets completely. There's still a part of me that believes I can rebuild." "Then come back," Michael said simply. "Come back and we'll face this together." Robert looked at Michael, then at the city waking up around them. "What if I fail again?" "Then we'll try again," Michael said. "As many times as it takes." Robert smiled for the first time in days. "All right, I'll try one more time." When they returned to the office, Daniel was waiting with a grim expression. "Michael, we need to talk," he said as soon as they walked in. "You can speak in front of Robert," Michael replied. "Fine," Daniel said, clearly irritated. "Yesterday, I received an offer from Davis Construction to buy my share of the company. I'm considering accepting." The announcement caught Michael off guard. "Because of Robert?" "Because of your priorities," Daniel corrected. "You're more concerned with social projects than business. This isn't the company I helped build." "Maybe it's time for the company to evolve," Michael said calmly. "Or maybe it's time for me to leave," Daniel countered. Robert, who had stayed quiet, spoke up. "Mr. Roberts, may I say something?" Daniel looked at him irritably. "What?" "You're right about me being outdated," Robert admitted. "You're right that I might scare off some clients, but you're wrong about one thing." "What's that?" "You're wrong to think this will destroy the company," Robert said. "Because a company that only wants clients who judge people by appearances isn't one that will grow in the long run." "How so?" "The world is changing, Mr. Roberts," Robert explained. "The new generations value companies with social responsibility, ones that give second chances, that look beyond appearances. What Michael is doing isn't charity, it's vision." Daniel was surprised by Robert's eloquence. "Besides," Robert continued, "in the last month, I've brought in 3 new clients for the company. Small ones, true, but they trust us precisely, because we're different from the competition." It was true. Robert had used his old contacts in security to attract new clients, smaller businesses that didn't have access to big market names. "That doesn't make up for losing the big clients," Daniel argued. "Maybe not today," Robert agreed. But today's small clients will be tomorrow's big ones, and they'll remember who believed in them when no one else did. The conversation went on for hours. In the end, Daniel decided not to sell his share of the company immediately, but made it clear he was watching the results. In the following weeks, Robert worked harder than ever, not just on security projects, but also studying the market, identifying opportunities, and creating strategies for the company. One of these strategies led to the biggest contract in the history of Thompson & Associates. Robert had noticed that many mid-sized companies were looking for more sophisticated security solutions, but couldn't afford the costs of the major players. He proposed creating a tailored package for this niche. "We can offer 80% of the quality of the big firms at 60% of the price," he explained to Michael. "The margin is smaller, but the volume will make up for it." The strategy worked. Within 3 months, Thompson & Associates had signed contracts with dozens of mid-sized companies. The firm's revenue grew by 40%. Daniel had to admit he'd been wrong about Robert. I misjudged you," he said in a meeting with Michael and Robert. "I apologize for judging you by appearances." "No need to apologize," Robert replied. "I understand your concern. If I were in your position, I'd probably have the same doubts." But even with his professional success, Robert still battled personal demons. The loneliness of his apartment weighed on him. Sometimes he still dreamed of Lily Grace and woke up in tears. It was Patricia, the secretary, who noticed Robert seemed sad despite his achievements. "Mr. Robert, may I say something?" "Of course, Patricia. Have you ever tried reaching out to your ex-wife?" The question caught Robert off guard. "Catherine? No, I wouldn't even know where to start. And even if I did, I'm not sure she'd want to see me." "But you won't know unless you try," Patricia insisted. "Maybe it's time to face the past." The idea lingered in Robert's mind. Did Catherine still think of him? Had she forgiven the mistakes he'd made? Michael noticed Robert seemed distracted and asked what was going on. "I'm thinking of trying to find Catherine," Robert admitted. "Your ex-wife?" "Yes, but I don't know if it's a good idea. Maybe it's better to leave the past behind. Or maybe it's time to make peace with it," Michael suggested. "Want me to help you look for her?" With Michael's help and a private investigator, they discovered Catherine lived in Boston, where she worked as a nurse at a public hospital. She had remarried and had 2 children. The news left Robert torn. On one hand, he was happy to know Catherine had rebuilt her life. On the other, he felt a pang of jealousy and sadness. "I don't think I should reach out," he told Michael. "She has a new family. I have no right to disrupt that." "Maybe you don't have to disrupt anything," Michael said. "Maybe you just need closure. Ask for forgiveness, explain yourself, make it clear you don't want to cause harm." After much hesitation, Robert decided to write a letter. He spent weeks crafting it, explaining his journey, apologizing for past mistakes, expressing happiness that she had found peace. Catherine's reply came 2 weeks later. It was brief but kind. "Robert, I was surprised and happy to hear you've turned your life around. I always knew you were a good man who'd lost his way. I hold no grudges from the past. Lily Grace would be proud of the man you've become. God bless you, Catherine." Robert cried when he read the letter. Not tears of sadness, but relief. Catherine's forgiveness had healed a wound he'd carried for 15 years. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. With Catherine's forgiveness and his success at the company, Robert began thinking about how he could give back for the opportunities he'd received. That's when an idea came to him, one that would change not just his life, but many others. "Michael, can I propose something?" he asked one Friday afternoon. Of course. "How about we create a social reintegration program here at the firm?" Robert suggested. "We could give opportunities to others going through tough times." "How would it work?" "Partnerships with shelters, rehab centers, vocational training," Robert explained. "People who want a second chance but can't get one because of prejudice." Michael liked the idea but knew it would be a challenge. "And how would we ensure it works?" "With follow-up training, a structured program," Robert replied. I could oversee it. After all, no one understands their struggles better than someone who's been there. The proposal was presented to the entire team at Thompson and Associates. To everyone's surprise, Daniel was one of the most enthusiastic. "So you know what?" he said. "If we can make this program work, we could sell the model to other companies. It'd be another business line for us." The Second Chance program, as it was named, started modestly. They selected 5 socially vulnerable individuals for a 6-month pilot. Among them were Martha, a 45-year-old woman who lost her job after mental health struggles, Charles, a 25-year-old who couldn't find work after prison, and Mrs. Florence, a 60-year-old who lost everything after her husband's bankruptcy. "Every case is a story," Robert told the team, "and every story deserves respect and a real opportunity." The program wasn't easy. There were failures, dropouts, moments of discouragement. Martha had a depressive relapse and missed work for a week. Charles got into a fight with a co-worker. Mrs. Florence struggled with modern technology. "Maybe it's too soon for a program like this," Daniel remarked after a particularly tough week. "Or maybe that's exactly why we need to keep going," Robert countered. "Because if we don't give these opportunities, who will?" Robert worked tirelessly with each participant. He talked Martha through her anxiety attacks, teaching her relaxation techniques he'd learned in his own dark times. He mediated the conflict between Charles and his co-worker, helping them understand their differences. He showed endless patience, teaching Mrs. Florence to use a computer. Slowly, results emerged. Martha discovered a talent for organization and became an administrative assistant. Charles showed a knack for sales and landed his first contracts. Mrs. Florence, with her life experience, became a natural mediator among staff. The pilot's success caught local media attention. A New York City paper ran a story on Thompson and Associates initiative. "Company offers second chance," and "profits from it," read the headline. The coverage brought visibility but also criticism. Some competitors accused the firm of using social marketing for promotion. "They're just trying to look good," a rival executive commented. "It's all a marketing ploy." The criticism bothered Robert more than he expected. In a conversation with Michael, he voiced his doubts. What if they're right? What if we're being paternalistic? What if we're using these people to make ourselves feel better? "Robert," Michael said firmly, "remember when you showed up here and said you didn't want charity, you wanted a chance to work?" "I do." "That's exactly what we're offering these people. Real job opportunities, fair wages, real responsibilities. If this is marketing, then let it be the best marketing in the world." The conversation reassured Robert, but he knew they had to prove the program was more than just appearances. They needed concrete results, and the results came. After 6 months, 4 of the 5 participants in the pilot program were hired as regular employees. The 5th, Charles, was helped into a position at a partner company. More important than the numbers were the personal transformations. Martha had overcome her anxiety issues and was attending therapy regularly. Charles had reconciled with his family after years of estrangement. Mrs. Florence had become a kind of surrogate mother to the younger employees. "This is bigger than we imagined," Michael remarked during a program review meeting. "How so?" Robert asked. "We're not just changing these people's lives," Michael explained. "We're changing our company's culture. Everyone here has become more human, more collaborative." It was true. The presence of people who had faced real hardships had touched the entire team. Employees complained less about minor issues, helped each other more, and were more grateful for the opportunities they had. The program's success caught the attention of other companies. Several reached out to Thompson and Associates to implement similar initiatives. "Could you consult us on how to create a program like this?" asked the HR director of a multinational. "Of course," Michael replied, "but there's one condition." "What is it?" "Robert will lead the consultancy. He's the one who truly understands how this works." The offer was financially tempting, but Robert hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he told Michael. "Talking to executives at big companies about social reintegration. Why not?" Because sometimes I still feel like an imposter," Robert admitted. "Some mornings I wake up thinking this is all a dream and I'll end up back on the streets." "Robert," Michael said, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder, You stopped being homeless the day you refused the $3 million from the vault on principle. That showed me you were so much more than your past suggested. But what if I fail? What if I can't convince these companies? Then you'll fail trying to do the right thing, Michael answered, and that's already more than most people do. Robert eventually accepted the challenge. His first presentation would be to the board of Watson & Sons Construction, ironically, the same company that had cancelled their contract when they learned about his past. "Do they know who I am?" Robert asked Michael the day before the presentation. "They do," Michael confirmed, "and they still want to hear your proposal." The presentation was scheduled for Monday morning. Robert spent the entire weekend preparing, rehearsing every word, anticipating every possible question. When he arrived at the Watson & Sons building, his palms were sweating. It was an imposing structure, lined with marble and expensive artwork, the kind of place where 2 years ago he wouldn't even have been allowed inside. "Mr. Wilson," the receptionist greeted him, "the directors are waiting in the conference room." Robert walked down the hall, trying to steady his nerves. When he entered the room, he faced 8 executives seated around a mahogany table. "Mr. Wilson," said the chairman, William Watson, "it's a pleasure to meet you in person." Robert was surprised by the cordial welcome. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Watson. You can begin whenever you're ready," said William, gesturing toward the projection screen. Robert took a deep breath and started his presentation. He spoke about his own journey, the challenges of social reintegration, and the benefits a structured program could bring to the company. "The question isn't whether these people deserve a second chance," Robert said, looking directly at each director. "The question is whether we as a society have the courage to create systems that make those second chances possible." During the presentation, Robert noticed the directors were genuinely engaged. They asked technical questions, wanting to understand the costs, risks, and benefits. "How do you handle failures?" asked the HR director. "With learning," Robert replied. "Every failure teaches us something about how to improve the program. Besides, even when someone doesn't fully adapt, they usually leave the program in a better place than when they entered." "And what's the success rate?" 80% of participants achieve some form of stability, Robert explained. 60% secure permanent positions or find steady jobs, but I'd say 100% of companies that implement the program benefit in some way. How so? Because having people who truly value an opportunity changes the entire workplace. "Dynamic," Robert said. "Other employees start appreciating what they have more, complain less, and collaborate better." At the end of the presentation, William Watson stood and extended his hand to Robert. "Mr. Wilson, in recent years, we've lost contracts because we thought we could judge people by appearances. You're giving us the chance to correct that mistake." "What do you mean?" "We want to implement the program here at our company," William explained. "And we want you to be the lead consultant." Robert left the meeting in shock. Not only had he convinced the company, but he'd turned former critics into partners. When he told Michael, his friend couldn't hide his pride. "See, I knew you. We're ready for this." "I still can't believe it worked," Robert admitted. "I always knew you could do it," Michael said, "ever since the day you cracked that vault." In the following months, Robert became a leading voice in corporate social reintegration programs. His personal story, combined with technical expertise and passion for the subject, made him a unique consultant in the field. He implemented programs in 12 different companies, each tailored to the organization's specific needs, and the results were consistently positive. But his biggest test came when he received an unexpected invitation. "Robert," Michael said one Friday, "you've been invited to speak at the National Human Resources Congress." "What?" Robert paled. "It's the biggest HR event in the country," Michael explained. 1,000 executives, directors from the largest companies in the United States. "Michael, I can't," Robert said, panicking. "It's too much pressure. What if I ruin everything?" "What if you inspire 1,000 people to change their companies?" Michael countered. Robert agonized over the invitation for days. The speech was 3 months away, plenty of time to prepare, but the scale of the event terrified him. It was Ryan, Michael's son, who finally convinced him to accept. "Mr. Wilson," the 18-year-old said, When my father hired you, I told him I admired him for helping someone who couldn't give anything in return. I remember. But I was wrong, Ryan continued. You've given so much in return, you're changing how people think about second chances, about prejudice, about what really matters in life. But it's such a huge responsibility. That's exactly why you have to speak, Ryan insisted, because if you don't, who will? In the end, Robert accepted the invitation. He spent the next 3 months meticulously preparing for the lecture. Michael helped him, as did Patricia and even Daniel. You're going to knock it out of the park, Daniel said the night before the event. And who would have thought I'd be rooting for a former homeless person? Former everything, Robert corrected with a smile. Former homeless, former alcoholic, former unemployed. Now I'm a social reintegration specialist consultant. The lecture was scheduled for Monday morning, prime time at the Congress. Robert arrived at the convention center 2 hours early, still nervous but determined. When he was announced, he stepped onto the stage and looked at the audience. 1,000 faces watched him with curiosity. He took a deep breath and began, "My name is Robert Wilson. 3 years ago, I was living on the streets of New York City. Today, I'm here to talk about how your company can benefit from giving second chances." The audience was completely silent. Robert continued, telling his story, explaining his journey, sharing the lessons he'd learned. "The question isn't whether these people deserve an opportunity," he said, echoing the words he'd used in his first presentation. "The question is whether we, as business leaders, have the vision to see potential where others only see problems." For 40 minutes, Robert held the audience captivated. He spoke about dignity, human potential, and how prejudice didn't just limit the victims but also the companies that lost talent by judging based on appearances. When he finished, the audience erupted in applause. People stood up, giving him a 5-minute ovation. Robert left the stage emotional, barely believing what had just happened. After the lecture, dozens of executives sought him out. They wanted to implement similar programs. They wanted consulting. They wanted to learn more about the Thompson & Associates model. "Mr. Wilson," said an HR director from a major company, "your lecture changed my perspective on hiring. I want to implement a program like this at our company immediately." In the days that followed, Robert received over 50 consulting offers. The demand was so great that he had to hire a team to help him. "I think we've created a monster," Michael joked when he heard about the impact. "A good monster," Robert replied, smiling. But with success came new challenges. Robert found himself constantly traveling, implementing programs in different cities, training teams, giving lectures. The intense pace began to take its toll. He was constantly tired, stressed, with little time for his own life. "You're repeating yourself," Michael observed in a conversation. "Working too hard, sacrificing yourself for a cause." "It's different this time," Robert protested. "Is it?" Michael asked. "Or are you making the same mistake you made with Lily Grace, focusing so much on work that you forget to live?" Michael's words hit Robert hard. It was true. He was losing himself in work again, even if it was for a noble cause. "What do you suggest?" Robert asked. "Balance," Michael replied simply. "Delegate, hire people, create a structure that works without depending solely on you." Robert knew Michael was right. He began assembling a larger team, training other consultants, creating methodologies that could be replicated without his constant presence. It was during this process that he met Clarissa, a psychologist specializing in social reintegration, who joined his team. Clarissa was 42, divorced, and the mother of a 12-year-old boy. She had worked for years in shelters and recovery centers, bringing a different perspective to Robert's work. "You're very focused on the technical and business side," she observed in a meeting, "but sometimes you forget the emotional aspect." "How so?" "The people we're helping don't just need jobs," Clarissa explained. "They need psychological support, emotional guidance, help dealing with past traumas." Robert realized she was right. He had been successful, but he still carried emotional scars he hadn't properly addressed. "Do you go to therapy?" Clarissa asked directly. "No," Robert admitted. "I never thought I needed it." "Everyone does," she said gently. especially people who've been through trauma like yours. Clarissa's suggestion made Robert reflect. Maybe it was time to care, not just for his career but also for his emotional health. He began therapy with a psychologist specializing in trauma. The sessions were difficult at first. Robert had to relive painful moments, confront feelings he'd buried for years. "You blame yourself for Lily Grace's situation," the therapist observed in one session. "Of course I blame myself," Robert replied. "If I'd paid more attention, or if you'd had access to better healthcare, or if her condition had been diagnosed earlier, or if, the therapist interrupted. "Robert, you're not responsible for every variable you couldn't control." Months of intensive therapy passed. Robert learned to process his guilt, to forgive himself, to understand he'd done the best he could with the knowledge and resources he had at the time. During this process, his relationship with Clarissa evolved from professional to personal. They began having dinner together after meetings, talking about things unrelated to work. "Have you ever thought about having a family again?" Clarissa asked during one of these conversations. "No," Robert answered honestly. "After losing Lily Grace and Catherine, I closed off that part of my heart. Maybe it's time to open it again," she suggested softly. Robert fell silent. The idea of emotionally opening up to someone scared him. What if he lost again? What if he failed as a partner? "You don't have to decide anything now," Clarissa said, sensing his hesitation. "Just think about the possibility." In the following months, Robert and Clarissa grew even closer. She introduced him to her son Matthew, a bright and curious boy who immediately took to Robert. "Are you the man who used to live on the street?" Matthew asked with the bluntness typical of children. "I was," Robert replied. "Now I live in an apartment." "And now you help other people who live on the street." "I help people who want a second chance in life," Robert explained. "Cool," said Matthew. "Everyone deserves a second chance." The simplicity of Matthew's observation touched Robert deeply. Here was a 12-year-old who understood something many adults couldn't grasp. Robert began spending more time with Clarissa and Matthew. They went to the movies, the park, took simple outings that Robert had forgotten could be so joyful. "You're happy," Michael observed in a conversation. "It's the first time I've seen you truly happy since we met." "See, I'm scared," Robert admitted. "Of what?" "Of ruining everything again," Robert said. "Of becoming obsessed with work, of failing as a partner, of disappointing Matthew." "Robert," Michael said firmly, "you're not the same person you were 15 years ago. You've learned, grown, developed. Trust yourself." The conversation with Michael helped Robert make up his mind. One December evening, he invited Clarissa to dinner at a special restaurant. "Clarissa," he said, holding her hands, "I'd like to try building something real with you and Matthew." "Are you sure?" she asked. "It's not an easy decision. It comes with responsibilities, commitments." "I know," Robert replied, "and that's exactly why I want to try. Because I've learned that the most valuable things in life come with responsibilities." Clarissa smiled and squeezed Robert's hands. "Then let's try." In the following months, Robert, Clarissa, and Matthew gradually built a family. It wasn't without challenges. Matthew tested Robert's limits, questioned his authority, and felt jealous of the attention his mother gave to her new partner. "You're not my dad," Matthew said during a particularly difficult argument. "You're right," Robert replied calmly. "I'm not your dad, but I'm someone who cares about you and wants the best for you." "Why?" Matthew asked, more curious than aggressive now. "Because the two of you are the family I chose," Robert explained. "And family is about choice, not just blood." The answer moved Matthew. Slowly, he began to accept Robert as a father figure in his life. During this time of building their family, Robert's work also evolved. His social reintegration consulting firm became a national benchmark. They had implemented programs in over 100 companies, helping more than 1,000 people re-enter the workforce. "You've become a phenomenon," Daniel said during Thompson and Associates' annual review meeting. "We've become a phenomenon," Robert corrected. "None of this would have been possible without your support. But it was your vision that made it happen," Michael added. "Your ability to turn a painful personal experience into a tool for social change." It was true. The program that had started as Robert's way of giving back had grown into something much larger. Other companies were creating similar initiatives, universities began studying the model, and the city government was considering public policies based on Robert's methodology. But the recognition that meant the most to him came from an unexpected place. One Tuesday afternoon, he received a call at his office. "Hello, Robert," said a familiar woman's voice. "Yes, who's speaking?" "It's Catherine." Robert nearly dropped the phone. It was the first time they had spoken since exchanging letters 2 years earlier. "Say, Catherine, how did you get my number?" "I saw a feature about you on TV," she explained. "About your work with social reintegration. I was so proud." "Thank you," Robert said, moved. "Robert, I called because I wanted to tell you something." "What?" "My husband and I are thinking of implementing a similar program at the hospital where I work," Catherine explained. "We have many patients who after treatment struggle to return to work because of prejudice." Robert was speechless. Catherine wanted to use his work to help others. "Would you like to consult for us?" she asked. "Professionally, of course." "It would be an honor," Robert replied. The conversation continued for a few more minutes. Catherine talked about her family, her work, her life in Boston. Robert spoke about Clarissa and Matthew, about how he had rebuilt his life. "You know what makes me happiest?" Catherine said before hanging up. "What?" "Knowing that our Lily Grace would be proud of the man you've become." When Robert hung up, there were tears in his eyes. But they were tears of peace, not sadness. Finally, he had closed all the chapters of his past. That evening at home with Clarissa and Matthew, Robert told them about Catherine's call. "How do you feel?" Clarissa asked. "At peace," Robert replied. "For the first time in 15 years, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "And where's that?" Matthew asked. Robert looked at the two most important people in his life. "Here," he said simply, "with you." The work with Catherine's hospital became one of the most rewarding projects of Robert's career. He traveled to Boston several times, always accompanied by Clarissa to implement the program. Seeing Catherine happy with her new family gave Robert a sense of fulfillment he hadn't expected to feel. She had moved past the loss of Lily Grace and built a new life. This gave Robert the certainty that he too could move forward completely. The hospital program was a success. In 6 months, they had managed to reintegrate dozens of people who had faced serious health issues back into the workforce. "You've created something truly special," Catherine told Robert and Clarissa during the program's results presentation. "We all created it," Robert corrected. "You, by having the courage to forgive the past and focus on the future." After the presentation, Catherine pulled Robert aside for a private conversation. "Robert, I want you to know something," she said. "What?" "Lily Grace would be so proud of you, not just for your professional success, but for the man you've become. A man who turns pain into purpose, who uses his wounds to heal others." "Thank you, Catherine," Robert said, moved. "That means everything to me. And I also want you to know that you're forgiven," Catherine continued. "Not just by me, but by her too. Stop carrying this guilt." Robert hugged Catherine and they both cried, not tears of sadness, but of liberation. Finally, the past was truly at peace. Back in New York City, Robert felt renewed. He had resolved all the emotional loose ends from his past, built a new family in the present, and created a professional legacy that would help people for years to come. It was in this state of mind that he received an offer that would once again change the course of his life. "Robert," Michael said one Monday morning, "I got a call from the Municipal Department of Social Development." "About what?" "They want to hire you as a consultant to create a municipal social reintegration program," Michael explained. "Something on a much larger scale than what we've done so far." Robert fell silent, processing the information. "Would this be a program for the entire city of New York?" he asked. "The entire metropolitan area," Michael confirmed. "They estimate it could benefit over 10,000 people a year." The magnitude of the proposal both impressed and frightened Robert. "I don't know if I'm ready for something this big," he admitted. "No one is more ready than you," Michael said. "You have the personal experience, the technical knowledge, the professional credibility. You're perfect for this. But it's a huge responsibility. What if I fail? Thousands of lives could be affected. And what if you succeed? Michael countered. Thousands of lives could be transformed. That evening, Robert discussed the proposal with Clarissa. What do you think? He asked. I think you already know the right answer, Clarissa replied. The question is whether you have the courage to take it. I'm afraid of losing myself in work again, Robert admitted. Then don't lose yourself, Clarissa said simply. Set boundaries, delegate responsibilities, maintain balance. Easier said than done. Then let's do it together, Clarissa suggested. I can coordinate the psychological aspect of the program. We'll be partners not just in our personal lives, but professionally too. Clarissa's proposal resolved Robert's biggest concern. With her by his side, he'd have someone to remind him of his limits, to keep him grounded in what truly mattered. All right, Robert finally said, let's accept. 6 months later, the New York City Municipal Social Reintegration Program was launched, with a ceremony attended by the mayor, city officials, business leaders, and civil society representatives. Robert stepped up to the podium to deliver the opening speech. He looked at the audience and saw familiar faces: Michael and his family, Daniel, Patricia, the employees of Thompson and Associates, the people who had participated in the first programs, Catherine, who had come from Boston especially for the occasion. 4 years ago, Robert began, I was a lost man without hope living on the streets of this city. Today I'm here to launch a program that will give thousands of people the same opportunity I received, a second chance. During his speech, Robert told his story again, but now from a different perspective. It was no longer about his downfall and personal recovery. It was about how a personal experience could become a tool for social change. This program isn't about charity, Robert emphasized. It's about justice. Justice for people who deserve. A real opportunity to rebuild their lives. Justice for a society that will benefit from the talents and experiences of these individuals. The program was implemented gradually, starting with a pilot project in 5 regions of the city. Robert and Clarissa worked tirelessly to train the teams, create protocols, and establish partnerships with businesses. The results of the first 6 months exceeded all expectations. Over 1,000 people had been helped, with an 85% success rate in reintegrating them into the workforce. You've created something revolutionary, the municipal secretary said during an evaluation meeting. We just systematized something we already knew worked, Robert replied humbly. But inside, he was proud. Not just of the program's success, but of how he had managed to keep it human and personal, even on such a large scale. A year after the municipal program's launch, Robert received an honor he had never imagined. Robert Wilson, the announcer declared at a solemn ceremony, honorary citizen of New York City, for his exceptional work in transforming lives and inspiring social change. When Robert stepped onto the stage to receive the honor, he thought about the entire journey he had taken. From the desperate man who had nearly given in to the temptation to drink on his first day of work, to the respected consultant now receiving the city's highest recognition. But the most emotional moment of the ceremony wasn't when he received the medal. It was when Matthew, now 15, stepped onto the stage and hugged him. I'm proud of you, Dad, the boy said, using that word to refer to Robert for the first time. Robert couldn't hold back his tears. There was the greatest reward of his entire journey, a family who loved him and whom he cared for. After the ceremony, there was a celebration at Michael's house. All of Robert's friends and family were there. It wasn't just a celebration of the honor, but of everything they had achieved together. Remember when you showed up at my office 4 years ago? Michael asked Robert during a quieter moment at the party. I remember it like it was yesterday, Robert replied. Did you believe you'd make it this far? Robert thought for a moment before answering. No, he said honestly. That day, I just wanted a chance to prove I could still be useful. I never imagined I'd come this far. And now? Michael asked. What's next? Robert looked around the party. He saw Clarissa talking with Jennifer, Michael's wife. He saw Matthew playing with Ryan and Emma. He saw Catherine laughing with Patricia. He saw all the people who had become his chosen family. Now, Robert said, I want to keep doing what I do, but without losing sight of what really matters. I want to expand the program to other cities, help more people, but always remembering that success is only worth it if it's shared with the ones we love." "Wise words," Michael remarked. "Learned the hard way," Robert laughed, "and twice." The two friends fell silent for a moment, observing the party around them. "Thank you," Robert finally said. "For what?" "For seeing something in me that I couldn't see myself," Robert explained. "For giving me a chance when no one else would." "Robert," Michael said, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder, "you're mistaken if you think I gave you anything. All I did was recognize what was already there. The credit is all yours." "Ours," Robert corrected. "The credit is ours. All of ours." And it truly was. Robert's transformation hadn't been the work of just one person, but of a support network. People who believed in him, challenged him to grow, and stood by him in tough times. 3 years after the tribute, Robert was in his office on a Friday afternoon, reviewing reports for the municipal program. He had just turned 45, had been married to Clarissa for 2 years, and had officially adopted Matthew. The municipal program had expanded across the entire New York City metropolitan area and was being replicated in 5 other cities in the state. Over 15,000 people had been helped in the last 4 years. "Dad," Matthew said, stepping into the office, "can I talk to you?" "Of course, son. What is it?" "I have a school assignment about people I admire," Matthew explained. "Can I write about you?" Robert smiled. "Wouldn't choosing your dad be a little too obvious?" "Maybe," Matthew agreed, "but not because you're my dad. It's because you taught me that it doesn't matter how many times we fall. What matters is how many times we get back up." Matthew's words struck Robert deeply. Here was a teenager who understood one of life's most important lessons. "You can write about me," Robert said, "but include one important thing in your assignment." "What?" "That no one can get back up alone," Robert explained. "We always need others to reach out, to believe in us, to remind us of who we really are. Like Uncle Michael did for you." "Exactly. And like so many others did too." Matthew left the office to start his assignment, and Robert was alone with his thoughts. He looked out the window at New York City in all its complexity. Modern buildings, mixed with old ones, chaotic traffic, people rushing everywhere. Somewhere out there were people facing the same struggles he once had. People lost, hopeless, thinking there was no way out. And he knew that a small opportunity, a gesture of trust, a second chance, could completely change the course of their lives. That was why Robert kept doing what he did. Not for recognition, not for awards, not for professional success, but for the chance to be for someone what Michael had been for him, a bridge between despair and hope. That evening, during family dinner, Clarissa asked a question that made them all reflect. "If you could go back in time and change one thing in your lives, would you?" Matthew was the first to answer. "I'd change my birth parents' divorce," he said, "so I wouldn't have had to go through all that mess." "And you, love?" Clarissa asked Robert. Robert thought for a long moment. "That's a hard question," he finally said, "because if I changed anything in my past, I might not have ended up with the two of you. I might not have developed the empathy I need for the work I do now." "Not even saving Lily Grace?" Clarissa asked gently. "If I could save her without changing everything else, yes," Robert replied. "But if I had to choose between saving her and losing you both, I wouldn't know what to do." "I think Lily Grace would be happy to know you found a new family," Matthew said with the surprising wisdom he sometimes showed. "I think so too," Robert agreed, smiling at his son. "And you, Mom?" Matthew asked Clarissa. "What would you change?" "Nothing," Clarissa answered without hesitation, "because everything I've lived through, the good and the bad, brought me to you two." They kept talking through the night, sharing memories, making plans for the future, simply enjoying each other's company. For Robert, those were the most precious moments, not the public honors, not the professional recognition, but the simple moments of human connection with the people he loved. Later, when Matthew went to sleep and Clarissa was reading in the living room, Robert stepped out, onto the apartment balcony. The city stretched before him, millions of lights twinkling in the night. He thought of Michael, who had risked his reputation to give a stranger a chance. He thought of Catherine, who had found the strength to forgive and move forward. He thought of Lily Grace, who still lived in his memory and in the lives he helped transform. He thought of all the participants in the reintegration programs he had coordinated over the years. People like Martha, who had overcome her depression and now managed one of the municipal program's centers, like Charles, who had become a successful businessman and funded scholarships for at-risk youth, like Mrs. Florence, who had become a kind of matriarch of the program, advising new participants. Each of these people had proven that transformation was possible, that second chances worked, that human potential was greater than any circumstance. "What are you thinking about?" Clarissa asked, joining him on the balcony. "About how strange life is," Robert replied. 5 years ago, I was sleeping under an overpass. Today, I'm here with you, planning our future, impacting thousands of lives. Do you believe it was fate? I believe it was a mix of opportunity and choice, Robert reflected. Michael gave me the opportunity, I chose to take it. And now you offer the same opportunities to others. "Do we offer them?" Robert corrected. "It only works because it's a collective effort." They stood in silence for a few minutes, just enjoying the night and each other's company. "Clarissa," Robert finally said, "thank you." "For what?" "For teaching me it was possible to love again. For showing me that family isn't just about blood, but about choice and commitment." "Thank you," Clarissa replied, "for showing me it's possible to be brave enough to start over." They embraced on the balcony, two adults who had found in each other the possibility of a new beginning. The next day, a Saturday, Robert did something that had become a monthly ritual. He visited the places where he used to stay when he lived, on the streets. It wasn't an exercise in masochistic nostalgia, but a way to stay connected to his roots, to remember where he came from and why he did the work he did. This time he was accompanied by Matthew, who had asked to learn this part of Robert's story. "Is this where you used to sleep?" Matthew asked when they stopped under an overpass in the city's east side. "Sometimes," Robert answered. "When I could find a spot." "What was it like?" "Cold, scary, lonely," and Robert said honestly. "But it also taught me resilience, about finding dignity even in the worst circumstances." They walked through the streets and Robert pointed out meaningful places. The bakery where he asked for water, the gas station where he sometimes got to use the restroom, the church that opened its doors on the coldest days. "A lot of people helped me," Robert explained to Matthew. "Small gestures that made a difference. A glass of water, a sandwich, a blanket, a kind word." "Is that why you help others now?" "Partly," Robert answered, "but mostly because I've found that helping others gives meaning to what I went through." During their walk, they came across several people experiencing homelessness. Robert greeted some he knew, exchanged brief words with others, always with respect and dignity. "Hi, Mr. Wilson," said a man around 40. "How are you?" "Hi, Peter. Everything's fine," Robert replied. "How about you?" "Surviving," Peter answered with a sad smile. Robert talked with Peter for a few minutes. He learned Peter had lost his job during the pandemic and hadn't been able to find another. He had family but didn't want to go back home until he could get back on his feet. "Peter," Robert said, "can I give you my card? If you're interested in a job opportunity, call me." "Really?" Peter asked, disbelieving. "Really? Our program is always looking for people who want a second chance." As they walked away from Peter, Matthew asked a question that surprised Robert. "Dad, aren't you afraid people will take advantage of your kindness?" "What do you mean?" "I don't know, like lying about wanting to work just to get something from you?" Robert stopped walking and looked at his son. "Matthew, there will always be people who try to take advantage. But if I let fear of those few stop me from helping the many who truly need it, then the cynics win." "But isn't it frustrating when someone lets you down?" "It is," Robert admitted. "But the joy of seeing someone like Peter turn their life around makes up for all the disappointments." They continued walking, and Robert told Matthew about some of the people he'd helped over the years. Successes and failures, victories and letdowns. "What matters," Robert concluded, "isn't having 100% success rate. It's giving each person a real chance to try." When they got home, Clarissa was preparing lunch. "How was your walk?" she asked. Eye-opening, Matthew answered. Now I understand better why Dad does what he does. And what did you understand? That he doesn't help people because he's just nice, Matthew explained. He helps because he knows any of us might need a second chance someday. Robert smiled at his son's answer. Matthew had grasped one of the most important lessons. Empathy isn't charity, it's recognizing our shared humanity. Over lunch, they planned their year-end vacation. They'd rented a beach house with Michael and his family. It'll be weird seeing Uncle Michael in shorts and flip-flops, Matthew joked. Why? Clarissa asked. Because I always see him in a suit, serious, talking business, Matthew explained. Michael needs rest too, Robert said. He works as hard as any of us. It was true, Michael had become not just a business partner, but a true friend. Their families had grown close over the years, often spending holidays and vacations together. The friendship between Robert and Michael had come a long way since that first day in the office. They'd learned to support each other, celebrate each other's successes, and share worries and challenges. You know what impresses me most about Uncle Michael? Matthew said. What? How much he changed after meeting you, Dad. His mom even said he used to be way more arrogant. People change when they find purpose, Robert observed. Michael found purpose in making a difference in others' lives. Like you? Like all of us, I hope, Robert replied. After lunch, Robert retreated to his home office to work on an article about social reintegration methodologies for an international academic journal. The article was a reflection on the 5 years of the program he had coordinated, the lessons learned, the challenges faced, and the necessary adaptations. As he wrote, Robert thought about how his life had completely changed, from someone who consumed knowledge about security to someone who produced knowledge about social transformation. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Robert, it was Michael's voice. Hi, Michael, how are you? I'm calling because I just received an interesting proposal, Michael said. The Rockefeller Foundation wants to fund a pilot program based on our methodology. Here in the United States? In Canada, Michael explained. They want to test if our model works in another cultural context. Robert fell silent, for a moment, processing the information. It would be an incredible opportunity, he finally said. But it would also be a huge challenge, Michael pondered. Coordinating an international program, dealing with cultural differences, adapting methodologies. Do you think we should accept? I don't know, Michael admitted. That's why I'm calling. I want your opinion. Robert thought about the proposal. On one hand, it was a chance to expand the program's impact, to help people. In another country, to prove that the model truly worked in different contexts. On the other hand, it would mean more work, more responsibility, more time away from family. Can I talk to Clarissa and give you an answer tomorrow? Robert asked. Of course. But remember, it would just be an initial consultancy. We wouldn't need to move to Canada. Even so, I want to talk to her. That night, Robert told Clarissa about the proposal. What do you think? He asked. I think it's a unique opportunity, Clarissa replied. But I also know you're worried about balancing work and family. Exactly. I don't want to repeat past mistakes. But this time, you're not alone, Clarissa reminded him. You have a supportive family, a competent team, established systems. That's true. Besides, Clarissa continued, Matthew is growing up. In a few years, he'll be in college. Maybe it's the right time to broaden our horizons. Would you come with me on trips to Canada? Sometimes yes, Clarissa said, depending on schedules and Matthew's school. They talked for hours about the pros and cons of the proposal. In the end, they decided to accept, but with clear conditions about boundaries and priorities. Family first, Robert said. Always, Clarissa agreed. The next day, Robert called Michael and shared their decision. We'll accept, but with a few conditions. What are they? First, short trips, no more than a week per month. Second, Clarissa oversees the psychological aspect of the program in Canada as well. Third, all planning must respect our family commitments. Perfect, Michael agreed. I was expecting those conditions. What do you mean? Because I set the exact same conditions, Michael laughed. Jennifer also made me promise not to let work take over our lives. The two friends laughed, recognizing they had learned the same lessons about work-life balance. In the following months, Robert and Clarissa began working on the Canadian project. It was challenging to adapt methodologies developed for the American reality to a different context, but it was also exciting. They traveled to Toronto several times, always bringing Matthew along when possible. The teenager loved exploring another country and practicing the Spanish he was learning in school. "Dad," Matthew said during one of these trips, "have you ever thought about writing a book about your story?" "What for?" Robert asked. "To inspire other people," Matthew replied. "Like to show that it's possible to start over even when everything seems lost." Matthew's suggestion stayed on Robert's mind. Maybe it really was time to put his experience into writing, not just to tell his story, but to organize the lessons that could help others. "You know what?" he said to Clarissa that evening. "I think Matthew is right about the book. Would you write about your personal story? About the journey of transformation," Robert corrected. "Not just mine, but everyone we've helped over the years. Would it be a technical book or an autobiography?" "A mix," Robert mused aloud. "Real stories that illustrate principles of social transformation." Clarissa liked the idea and offered to help with the psychological support aspects. "We could do it together," she suggested, "each of us contributing our expertise." Robert loved the idea of another joint project with Clarissa. They had discovered they worked very well as a team, complementing each other's skills. They began working on the book on weekends, between projects in the United States and Canada. It was a slow but enjoyable process. They interviewed dozens of people who had participated in the programs, collected testimonials, and organized methodologies. "You know this book is going to inspire so many people, right?" Michael said when he learned about the project. "We hope so," Robert replied. "But mostly we hope it serves as a practical guide for others who want to implement similar programs." "Don't forget to include the failures too," Michael suggested. "People need to know not everything works on the first try." It was good advice. Robert and Clarissa made sure the book included not just successes, but also failures, challenges, and necessary adjustments along the way. "Transformation isn't a linear process," they wrote in one chapter. "It's a path full of ups and downs, progress and setbacks, victories and failures. What matters is never giving up on the possibility of change." The book took 2 years to complete. When it was finally published, it received a very positive response. Universities began using it as study material. Companies drew inspiration to create their own programs, and people in vulnerable situations found hope and guidance. "They've created something that will impact generations," the publisher said during the launch. Robert looked at Clarissa and smiled. They had truly turned personal experiences into tools for social change. At the launch, Matthew, now 17, gave a speech that moved everyone. "My father taught me that our story isn't defined by the problems we face, but by how we choose to handle them," the young man said. "This book proves it's possible to turn pain into purpose, failure into wisdom, and despair into hope." After the launch, Robert received hundreds of messages from people inspired by the book. Some were from individuals in vulnerable situations who found the courage to seek help. Others were from business owners who decided to implement second chance programs. Many were simply from people who wanted to thank him for showing that transformation was possible. "You've become a reference," Clarissa observed a few months after the launch. "We've become a reference," Robert corrected. "This is the result of many people's work." It was true. The book's success, like all of Robert's other successes, had been the result of collective effort. Michael, Daniel, Patricia, Clarissa, Matthew, everyone who had participated in the programs had contributed to what it had become. 2 years after the book's release, as Robert was about to turn 50, he received an invitation that surprised him. "Robert," Michael said one morning, "you've been invited to speak at the UN." "What?" Robert was speechless. "The United Nations Economic and Social Council wants you to present our social reintegration model as a potential global public policy." Robert sat heavily in his chair. The UN? This was far more than he had ever imagined. "Michael, I don't know if I'm ready for this." "Robert, you've already spoken to thousands of people, implemented programs in dozens," Of companies written a book being translated into 5 languages, Michael listed. If you're not ready, no one is. But the UN is different. It's global, it's political, it's an opportunity to impact public policies worldwide, Michael interrupted. Imagine how many lives could be changed if our model were adopted globally. Robert spent days thinking about the invitation. The magnitude of the opportunity both terrified and excited him. "What do you think?" he asked Clarissa. "I think you've spent your whole life preparing for this moment," she replied, "even when you didn't realize it." "What do you mean?" "Your personal experience, your technical knowledge, your communication skills, your credibility." Clarissa listed. "All of it has brought you here. But what if I fail? What if I can't convince the delegates?" "Then at least you'll have tried," Clarissa said, "and that's already more than most people do." Robert eventually accepted the invitation. The talk would be in New York at the UN headquarters for delegates from all member countries. The preparation was intense. Robert studied public policies from different nations, adapted his presentation for a global context, and prepared for questions about implementation across diverse cultures and political systems. "Don't lose your essence," Michael advised. "What makes your message powerful is its authenticity, your real-life experience." On the day of his flight to New York, his entire family came to see him off at the airport. "We're so proud of you, Dad," said Matthew, now an 18-year-old about to start college. "Thank you, son," Robert replied, moved. "You all are my strength. Go show the world that change is possible," Clarissa said, kissing him. During the flight to New York, Robert reflected on his entire journey. 10 years earlier, he had been sleeping on the streets of New York City. Now, he was about to speak at the UN about social transformation. But what struck him most wasn't the change in his external circumstances. It was the internal transformation. He had become a more compassionate, wiser person, more connected to his life's purpose. "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger," he murmured to himself, recalling a phrase he'd once read. But he quickly corrected the thought. That wasn't quite right. What doesn't kill you gives you the chance to choose whether to grow stronger. The choice is always there. In New York, Robert was greeted by a UN team who guided him through the process. He visited the building where he'd speak, familiarized himself with the simultaneous translation systems, and rehearsed his presentation. "Mr. Wilson," the event coordinator said, "the delegates are very interested in your proposal. We rarely see this much pre-event engagement for a presentation." The night before the talk, Robert called home. He spoke with Clarissa and Matthew, with Michael, even with Catherine, who had called to wish him luck. "Robert," Catherine said, "Lily Grace would be so proud to see how far you've come." "Thank you, Catherine. That means the world to me." The morning of the presentation, Robert woke early and walked the streets of New York. It was a city pulsing with energy, diversity, and opportunity. But he also saw people experiencing homelessness, reminding him that the challenges they faced in the United States existed everywhere. "That's why I'm here," he told himself, "to show there's a way to address these challenges." At the UN headquarters, Robert was escorted to the room where he would deliver his speech. It was impressive. Hundreds of delegates from all over the world, simultaneous translators, sophisticated communication systems. When it was announced, Robert took the podium and looked at the audience. He took a deep breath and began. "My name is Robert Wilson. 10 years ago, I lived on the streets of New York City, United States. Today, I'm here to share with you how structured social reintegration programs can transform lives and societies." For 45 minutes, Robert held the attention of the entire assembly. He told his personal story, presented data from the implemented programs, explained methodologies, and showed results. "The question isn't whether these people deserve a second chance," he said, echoing words he had used many times before. "The question is whether we, as a global society, have the wisdom to understand that investing in second chances is investing in our collective future." At the end of the presentation, the delegates applauded for several minutes. Many approached him afterward to ask questions and express interest in implementing similar programs in their countries. "Mr. Wilson," said the delegate from Sweden, "could your model be adapted for refugees?" "Of course," Robert replied. "The principles are the same: dignity, real opportunity, structured support. What about former inmates? Asked the delegate from Canada. We've already implemented specific programs for that population, Robert confirmed. With excellent results. The questions and conversations went on for hours. Robert realized he had touched on something universal, the human need for second chances, the search for solutions to complex social problems. In the following days, while still in New York, Robert received invitations from several countries to present the program. France, Germany, Japan, Australia, all wanted to learn more about the American model. You've created a global movement, said the UN coordinator on the last day. We created it, Robert corrected, thinking of all the people who had contributed to getting there. When he returned to the United States, Robert was welcomed as a national hero. The press widely covered his participation at the UN. Politicians began talking about expanding social reintegration programs, and universities invited him to teach. But for Robert, the most meaningful moment was when he arrived home and was greeted by Clarissa and Matthew. "How was it, love?" asked Clarissa. "Incredible," Robert replied, "but I'm happy to be home." "Dad," said Matthew, "I saw your talk online. You were amazing." "Thank you, son, but do you know what makes me happiest?" "What?" "Knowing that when I stood on that podium, I wasn't just representing my story, but the story of everyone who believed in second chances." That night, during dinner with his family, Robert realized he had come full circle. From the desperate man who opened a vault to make money to the international speaker, inspiring global public policies. But the most important thing wasn't the external change. It was having learned that true success isn't measured by recognition or social status, but by the ability to make a difference in others' lives. "Where do we go from here?" asked Clarissa. "Wherever life takes us," Robert answered. "But always together, always with purpose, always remembering where we came from." Matthew raised his glass of soda. "A toast," he said, "to family, to second chances, and to the power of never giving up." They toasted, and Robert felt a deep peace. He had found not just professional success, but something far more valuable. A family he loved, a purpose that inspired him, and the certainty that no matter how many times you fall, it's always possible to get back up again. End of story now. Tell us what you thought of Robert Wilson's story. Do you believe such transformations are possible in real life? Share your thoughts on second chances and overcoming challenges in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining us on this inspiring journey.